Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is Six Path Weeb, your go-to space for epic anime fanfics and bold reimaginings of your favorite universes. Today, we're diving into part 3 of one of our most intense stories yet. Naruko has ice in her veins, where emotions run cold, and the action burns hot. Quick disclaimer. This content is purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage or characters used in this video. All rights belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Now buckle up, we're diving in, let's get started. Zabuza was here. Naruko gently cracked her neck, her hands flowing with quiet determination as she checked her gear. Beside her, Haku and Tenten moved swiftly, retrieving their kunai with precise movements. Their eyes narrowed, focusing on the soft puff of smoke rising into the sky. Stepping into position on either side of Naruko, they took a solid stance, ready for anything. Naruko pulled a kunai and a paper tag from her pouch, narrowing her eyes as she watched the smoke. There was no way to tell what was inside. Or who. Come on, she told herself. Where are Ibiki-sensei and the Anbu? Naruko-chan, did you see what caused that smoke? Tenten asked. Naruko shook her head. Were there any workers in the area? Haku asked, glancing at her. Not that I saw. I didn't hear anyone shout either when it happened. The wind blew gently across the scene. In an instant, it felt like the world had paused. The surroundings, once alive with activity, now sat silent and still. Over broken stones and half-built supports, quiet footsteps echoed softly. But even in the quiet, nothing felt calm. The three young shinobi, Naruko, Haku, and Tenten, stepped forward, alert and focused as they scanned the area. Naruko swallowed nervously. What was in that smoke? Could it have been a simple mistake? Or had Zabuza already made a move? Her fingers trembled slightly as she took a deep breath. Step. 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 Breaking the silence would have taken real courage. To Naruko's right, Haku remained composed, her posture poised and graceful, every motion careful and exact. Her dark hair was tied up neatly, her presence unwavering. There was strength and calm in her, someone who wouldn't be intimidated easily. She glanced at Naruko, a spark of protectiveness in her gaze. She wouldn't let anyone harm her. Tenten, meanwhile, bit her lip in concentration, trying to keep her nerves steady. She took in every detail, the stone, the tools, the haze. And then something unusual. Her eyes locked onto a figure slumped near some crates 10 feet away. A man holding his arm, clearly struggling. His motions were slow and clumsy as he tried to remove something from his arm. Tenten-chan, what do you see? Naruko whispered. There's someone hurt to the left. Naruko turned her head slightly, scanning the man. He looks like he'll be okay. Do you see anything ahead? Nothing yet. Naruko moved forward softly, her steps almost silent. The mist thickened, spreading around them. Her eyes widened. She reached for Haku and Tenten, pulling them closer. Stay together, she said quietly. What are Ibiki-sensei and the Anbu doing? They should be guarding this area, Naruko said, a note of frustration in her voice. They must be trying to block Zabuza's movements, Haku suggested. This mist gives them cover, it opens a lot of strategic options. Then why are we just standing here? Tenten asked. Thinking, Haku replied. We need to know what they're planning. Then let's move while we think, Naruko said, signaling the others to follow her. Just as they emerged from the mist, powerful shock waves of chakra-based techniques crashed across the bridge. What is going on? Naruko pulled two scene bonds from her sleeves as Tenten and Haku mirrored her. I think I've figured it out, Tenten said dryly. Care to explain? Naruko replied, her voice light despite the tension. Tenten nodded ahead. Anbu operatives were moving gracefully, flipping through the air, watching Zabuza, who stood wielding a large sword. Naruko could almost sense their thoughts racing behind their masks. Ibiki and another Anbu moved toward a white-haired teen who controlled bone-like projectiles with unusual precision. So tell me, Ibiki called out calmly, why are you targeting the bridge builder? His tone was surprisingly relaxed, even kind. He seemed to be using a psychological strategy, trying to seem harmless. The Anbu beside him, in contrast, was pacing with intensity, radiating a sharp focus as he evaluated the opponent. Naruko gripped her scene bonds tightly. Something was building. Then, without warning, Ibiki surged forward, forcing the confrontation. Haku-chan, Tenten-chan. Let's go. Yes, Naruko-chan. They replied, falling in behind her. The three moved together in synchronized steps. Naruko stayed just behind Ibiki, using him as a shield from the opponent's view. An unseen attack would be most effective. Now. She pushed herself to move faster. Haku and Tenten kept pace with ease. As they approached, Ibiki's voice grew clearer. "You're not leaving this place with your mission completed," he said with unwavering confidence. "Once we've secured you, you'll get to meet a very persuasive friend of mine." He held up 2 fingers, signaling an unseen technique. Naruko slowed, watching carefully. Ibiki's strange confidence was both unsettling and effective. "Is he trying to scare him?" Tenten whispered. "Yes," Haku said. "Watch Kimimaro's expression." Sure enough, discomfort flickered across Kimimaro's normally calm face. He muttered something too quiet to hear. Then came a surprising reaction. Sharp white projections extended from his body, aimed precisely at Ibiki and the nearby Anbu. They evaded with agility. Naruko responded instantly, launching her senbons toward Kimimaro's arm and leg, targeting key pressure points. More needles followed from her teammates, hitting their mark and slowing him down. The teen's eyes widened with shock. Haku took a step forward, brushing off her robe. She walked slowly toward Kimimaro, her face calm but serious. "Are you doing what I think you're doing, Haku?" Naruko asked, concerned. Haku nodded. "Now is the right time. Remember the story I shared with you about where I come from?" "I do." "Do you remember who left me behind?" "Yes." "Did I ever tell you what they looked like?" Naruko's eyes widened. Haku nodded, her expression solemn. She gently placed a senbon near Kimimaro's shoulder, not to harm, but to immobilize and end the confrontation. "These 2, Haku said, were the ones who abandoned me." "What?" Naruko gasped. Haku looked back to Naruko, her piercing stare calming the storm that had threatened to rise. She understood that Naruko's intentions were pure, but closure was still something she needed. Fingering one particular senbon, Haku considered whether to intimidate the target before asking questions, but ultimately chose a more direct approach. She carefully pulled the senbon from the man's neck, her movement deliberate and slow, designed to provoke discomfort, not harm. Her next words were chilling, honed through precision and poise. The tone she used always sent a shiver through Naruko and Tenten, no matter how many times they heard it. "Speak. Why are you after my client?" Her voice was firm, calm, and unnervingly clear. The quiet forcefulness behind it made Naruko's throat tighten. "Will you answer me?" Silence. Haku's expression didn't waver, but a quiet breath escaped her. With purpose, she removed her mask. The man's reaction was immediate. Recognition dawned in his wide eyes, and his expression twisted with emotion. A tear welled up, and Haku's heart tensed. He remembered her. She kept her composure, raising another senbon to eye level. Her gaze lingered not on what it could do, but on the focus it brought her, sharp and unrelenting. She hadn't realized how cold she could feel in such a moment. "Now, will you speak?" Kimimaro stirred slightly, his voice soft and weary. "I will, but there's something you need to know." Haku offered a faint, composed smile and gently touched his cheek, motioning for Naruko and Tenten to come closer. She noticed the slow effect of the paralyzing agent, exactly as expected. As they gathered, a sudden disruption exploded beside them. A massive blade slammed into the ground, scattering stone in every direction. Haku shut her eyes instinctively, then darted away, agile and quick, shifting her position before another strike could land. "Get away!" a voice shouted urgently. Landing nearby, Haku regrouped beside Naruko and Tenten. The 2 eyed her carefully, surprised by her change in demeanor. Tenten peered into her eyes, searching for the reason behind her sudden intensity. "That's Haku, Zabuza-sama," someone muttered. The name made Haku's jaw clench, her glare intensifying. But before she could act, arms wrapped gently around her. "WH? Calm down, Haku-chan," came Naruko's soft voice. Haku stood stunned for a moment, comforted by the embrace, until it faded, leaving only the memory of warmth. She exhaled slowly, collecting herself, grounding her mind once again. "We'll talk about this later, okay?" Naruko said, her voice calm and supportive. Nodding, Haku turned her attention back to Zabuza and Kimimaro. The latter had pulled himself upright, leaning tiredly on Zabuza. Zabuza had used the momentary break to remove a few senbon from his body, letting them fall to the ground. He looked weary, yet determined. His eyes burned with focus as he raised his massive blade once again. "Haku?" Zabuza's voice was rough, uncertain. "Yes, Zabuza-sama." She was behind the mask, Kimimaro said. The air grew heavy with tension. The observing shinobi stood silently, wary. So, she's Anbu? One asked. I'm not sure. But no regular Jinan throws senbon like that. Naruko placed a supportive arm around both Haku and Tenten as they listened intently. Whatever came next, they were ready. The tension indicated that this conflict might not end easily. Kimimaro's expression shifted slightly. I've never seen Anbu without an animal mask, Zabuza murmured. Do you think the boss will be upset if we leave the mission? Kimimaro asked. Zabuza glared sideways at him, causing Naruko to step forward protectively, though Zabuza didn't act on his irritation. When we accept a mission, we complete it, he snapped, then fell quiet, realizing others were listening. Kimimaro nodded silently. Meanwhile, Ibiki directed the Anbu in low tones, instructing them to prepare traps. They couldn't afford to lose focus with Zabuza still active. He gave a subtle nod to his team, impressed by their discipline and strategy. We'll keep them distracted, he said, motioning slightly toward Haku. That was excellent presence. Nearby, behind a wall of rubble, a shinobi lay injured, his uniform torn, body aching from impact. Despite the pain, he could only observe helplessly, unable to move. Hope flickered, faint and unreachable. Konan watched the scene unfold from a distance. Her disguise, a simple transformation jutsu, had kept her hidden so far. She had taken the place of a fallen worker unnoticed during the chaos, her timing precise. She almost smiled at her success. For someone who had once been told she couldn't act, she was playing her role perfectly. Hey! Get that person out of here! Startled, Konan shook her head quickly, wincing with feigned pain. Focus on Zabuza. I'm fine, she said through clenched teeth. The Anbu hesitated, then turned away. Taking the opportunity, Konan soared upward, releasing a light cloud of mist as her wings unfurled. From the sky, she observed, prepared to stay out of sight and gather what intelligence she could. Back on the ground, Naruko stepped forward. Haku and Tenten followed closely behind. Naruko took a steady breath and began. Zabuza-san. Kimimaro-san. You're surrounded. Whether or not you accept it, you're outnumbered and overmatched. Her voice was even, sincere. You can refuse to surrender. Or you can speak with us. Maybe even come to an understanding, especially if what you have to say concerns Haku-chan. She motioned gently to Haku, who approached with poise. Tenten joined as well, the three forming a unified line. As Haku replaced her mask, Zabuza and Kimimaro frowned, their stance betraying confusion and unease. Tenten chuckled lightly, and Naruko joined in. Well? Naruko asked with a calm smile. Speechless? From a distance, Ibiki watched carefully as Zabuza lowered his weapon, its weight leaving a clear indentation in the stone. He assessed the scene and smirked slightly. The team had done exceptionally well. Most wouldn't have handled a situation like this with such confidence. Ibiki-san, one of the Anbu whispered. He raised a hand to signal silence. I know. Proceed. High above, Konan's eyes widened. Naruko. Move. Konan flapped her wings gently, the calm rhythm slightly disrupted by a rush of emotion at the mention of a familiar name. Naruko. Suddenly, the bridge shook from an intense wave, sending streams of water high into the air. The wave burst with impact, clearing away piles of debris into the waters below. 3 large water dragons formed, their paths cutting through the mist as they surged toward the bridge, thanks to the skilled efforts of the Anbu operatives. From below, Naruko swiftly dodged, gracefully maneuvering around and finding shelter behind a rocky wall near the water dragons. Haku and Tenten joined her, their coordination seamless. Haku glanced toward Naruko, then to Tenten, who coughed slightly after accidentally swallowing some of the water. Standing firm, Naruko executed the routine they had trained for tirelessly. Simple in design, yet remarkably effective, they had practiced it countless times, often with Shikamaru begrudgingly helping out. Zabuza had barely caught a glimpse of their masked forms, hidden skillfully by Haku's intricate ice manipulation. Thousands of tiny ice shards concealed them, acting almost like a misty curtain, perfectly disguising their movement. With their masks in place, all that remained visible was the unity that defined them as a team. Poetic, in a way. Still, Naruko considered, the strategy hinged on Haku's ability to disorient their opponents, and it was working. But if it failed, the entire technique would lose its edge. Hey, Tenten-chan, Haku-chan, Naruko said thoughtfully, pausing. What could she say in that moment? She leaned back slightly, blinking gently as she took a slow, steady breath. The air itself seemed to hum with tension. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? If you're thinking it shouldn't take us more than 2 minutes to wrap this up, Tenten replied with a playful smile. Haku chuckled softly and nodded in agreement. I think you're right. There's no way Zabuza and Kimimaro can slip past. Make sure they don't reach Ibiki-sensei's students, someone shouted. Zabuza and Kimimaro suddenly appeared, moving quickly toward them. Though scratched and exhausted, they pressed on with determination. There was no turning back now. Naruko signaled her teammates, then quickly formed hand signs to alert Ibiki-sensei, who stood about 50 yards away. Zabuza was approaching fast. Hold position, find an opening, and stop them. Behind them, the 3 water dragons collapsed back into the river, rippling as they vanished. That was a good sign. Ibiki-sensei understood the signal. We'll be the distraction again. Let's move, Naruko said with focus. So much for thinking it was over. Time to act. With practiced ease, she pulled more senbon from her pouch, her hand steady. The water-covered ground ahead reflected their images, Naruko, Haku, and Tenten, as they rushed forward, determined. Haku swiftly created a dome of mirrors made from ice, leaving narrow gaps for air and for weapons to be thrown. At the same time, Tenten unraveled a long scroll, spinning it around as wind whipped the mist into swirling patterns. A cool fog enveloped the dome as Zabuza and Kimimaro encircled them. Their footfalls were swift and precise. With a flick of her scroll, Tenten released a flurry of kunai, expertly launching them into the mist. Kimimaro dodged and deflected the blades with impressive agility, while Zabuza evaded with sheer speed. Tenten then slipped a handful of senbon into the icy barrier, moving just outside it with quiet precision. The swirling mist responded with an eerie whistling as the weapons zipped through it. She nodded to Naruko and Haku, ready for the next move. Keep up the pressure with your scrolls, Tenten-chan, Naruko instructed. Then, turning to Haku, she offered a warm, supportive smile and gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze, calmly reminding her she wasn't alone. All right. We'll go on the offense. Haku-chan, take control of your ice, we'll press in with support attacks whenever we can. Naruko's soft smile turned into a confident grin. Above them, Konan observed intently. Naruko? That couldn't be. Could it? Floating among the clouds, she watched the scene unfold below. The mist was heavy, but she used her paper techniques to gently push it aside, giving herself a clear view. From her vantage point, the battlefield looked chaotic, and the Anbu weren't gaining much ground. Come on. Hurry. Konan's eyes widened as she spotted Zabuza and Kimimaro approaching the trio near the wall. Then, an ice dome emerged. Kunai, countless of them, cut through the air. She stopped, halting the wind around her as she focused. And then, through the mist, a flash of red. Naruko. Konan's heart skipped a beat. Everything around her seemed to blur into shades of red. She extended her wings to keep herself upright as she floated gently down, eyes widening as she watched the protective barrier dissolve. The moment her feet touched the mist-covered ground, she felt a chill deep within her soul. No. Please. A distant voice cried. She placed a hand against the nearest building, trying to steady herself. That name, it couldn't be real. Was her mind playing tricks on her again? Was she hearing voices that weren't there? Konan shook her head, trying to ground herself. Despite everything, she couldn't ignore the signs. In frustration, she pressed a hand to her temple. Carefully, she reached into her hair and removed the paper flower nestled there. She folded it, reshaping it into the form of the 9 tails. The moment of truth was upon her, but what did it mean? That red hue, it was unmistakable. The vibrant energy signature of the 9-tailed fox. It wasn't just the aura, it was the girl it surrounded. Naruko. That energy burst from her in waves. And her hair, so similar to his. Konan trembled slightly, brushing her fingers against the damp grass at her feet as the remnants of a battle hung heavily in the air. A strange laugh escaped her lips, one that melted into tears she could no longer suppress. The voices on the bridge were growing louder, clashing with the overwhelming chakra that filled the mist. If this is Naruko, then maybe. A fragile, hopeful smile crossed Konan's face. Perhaps her long search hadn't been in vain after all. She crouched low, placing a hand gently on her cheek as if to calm the storm within her. If that girl really is my child, then I need to see her. Even just once. Her fingers curled against her face as emotion surged through her. Don't you touch her. Another voice called out. Konan's head turned toward the source. Without hesitation, she launched into the mist, the strange red glow sharpening her senses. Her wings fluttered quietly as she floated above the chaotic scene. She scanned the surroundings, broken structures, swirling fog, and fragments of shattered ice. "You may have some skill," a voice echoed through the mist, "but you're clearly out of your depth." A chill ran down her spine. She surged forward, heart racing, until she saw it, Naruko lying motionless, her body still. Two of her teammates hovered beside her protectively. Konan clenched her fists, her usually serene expression trembling under the weight of her emotions. "Please be okay, Naruko." Konan descended gracefully, paper wings fluttering. She summoned her strength and focused her energy. Sheets of paper materialized around her, folding into shurikens that swirled gently in the air. She released them toward the mist, focused not on vengeance but protection. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice calm and steady. Konan turned her eyes to Naruko, who was now safely being cared for by her team. She breathed out in relief, reassured that they had protected her. "Naruko-chan, wake up. Please." Naruko blinked slowly. Everything had happened so quickly. One moment they were gaining the upper hand, and the next, the tide had turned. Her vision was still hazy. Gentle hands brushed her forehead. "Good. You're awake. The Nine Tails energy helped stabilize you." Naruko's eyes adjusted to the dim light. A woman with soft blue hair leaned over her. A delicate paper flower rested on her head. Naruko realized she was lying in someone's lap, a cushion beneath her. They were inside a quiet cave, its walls lined with sheets of paper. The light filtering in was faint but warm. Naruko glanced around, spotting her teammates resting nearby, peacefully sleeping. "Where am I?" she asked softly. She tried to sit up, but a sharp twinge in her side made her flinch. The woman gently pressed her back down. "Easy now," she said in a soothing voice. "You opened your injuries again. Let me get fresh bandages." Naruko studied her. There was something comforting about her presence, something familiar. The woman turned toward a narrow passage, pausing. "Your friends are here with you. They're safe. Rest for now, I'll return soon. I promise." Naruko watched her go, puzzled but calm. "She's gone," Naruko murmured. "I know." Her presence was hard to miss, a quiet voice replied in her mind. Naruko sighed, turning her head slightly to look at Tenten and Haku, who slept nearby. They seemed unharmed aside from minor scrapes, and the soft paper beneath them served as makeshift beds. Konan, outside, stood quietly. She debated telling Naruko the truth, of who she was to her. But the moment wasn't right. Not yet. Soon, she hoped. Haku rose from the large pile of papers and settled comfortably next to Naruko. Warm energy pulsed softly through the space as the Kyuubi's chakra gently restored her strength. After a long pause, Haku broke the silence, patting the open space beside her. Tenten walked over slowly. "Why'd she leave when she knew how fast you can recover?" Yawning slightly as she sat, Tenten responded. She seemed concerned, and her body language suggested she was upset about something. Haku nodded thoughtfully. "And the way she focused on Naruko shows she has some kind of connection to her. But how could you two notice all that when you were in the dark, and wearing masks?" Naruko shifted uncomfortably. Haku gently rubbed Naruko's shoulder before giving it a light squeeze. "She was completely unconscious, wasn't she?" "We saw it after she carried us away in her arms," Tenten explained. "Don't ask how she did it because I don't really remember. I just remember this overwhelming sense of warmth," she added, cutting off Naruko's question. "Did she leave any clue as to where she took us?" Naruko asked. "Not that I could find." Haku glanced around the dim room, clearly searching for an exit. She removed her mask and let it fall to the ground, trying to find some relief from the thick heat inside the cocoon-like cave. Tenten followed her lead. "Haku-chan?" Naruko asked gently. She smiled and sat back down beside Naruko. Strangely, Haku didn't seem to notice a faint stain on her robe. If she did, she wasn't paying it any mind. Naruko let out a soft sigh. She needed to talk about what had happened on the bridge, about why Haku had reacted the way she did. Of course, Naruko already knew the answer. But she needed Haku to say it herself. "Why did you become so upset out there? It felt like you lost control for a moment." Sandals crunched softly on the forest floor as Konan walked calmly through the mist-covered woods. She glanced at a nearby tree, aware that Zetsu was probably watching. As usual, the ever-present observer from the Akatsuki was gathering information on the tailed beast movements. You can come out now, she said quietly. She was sure the earlier surge of chakra had caught his attention. Hopefully, he hadn't realized she had slipped away during all the chaos. Nine Tails Jinchuriki. Nearby, Zetsu's voice echoed from the shadows. He pointed toward a bridge in the distance. Konan smiled to herself. Wrong direction, Zetsu, better luck next time. The Akatsuki believed they had figured everything out. They assumed the tailed beast had been transferred, especially after Nagato forced her to leave the village the day Naruko was born, while her husband had gone to complete the sealing ritual. Afterward, no one could trace what had truly happened. Yes. Inform Itachi-san and Kisame-san that I am continuing the search near the border of Sunagakure. What evidence do you have suggesting the Nine Tails would be in that area? Reliable sources. Zetsu nodded silently. Very well. Then he faded back into the forest, his chakra presence disappearing completely. Sometimes being close to the leader had its benefits. Konan turned her attention back to her daughter and the others. Should she give them more time? Or perhaps she needed time herself. She moved swiftly along the path toward the town once ruled by Gato. As she walked, she ran her hand along the trees, as if searching for an answer hidden in the bark. Despite the false rumors about the Nine Tails moving to another host, it was clear now, her daughter was still the Jinchuriki. Konan's thoughts turned toward how she might protect her child and still fulfill Nagato's plan, though she had no idea how to separate the beasts safely. The idea of saving a host had never been fully realized. She walked for several minutes, arriving in a small town where traces of fish remains dotted the ground, scales gleaming in the midday sun. Strange, she thought. This village barely had enough food, why would they discard any? Dismissing the thought for now, Konan found a small supply shop. Though it had little to offer, she bought some worn but usable bandages. She exited quickly, eager to return to Naruko. Soon, she leapt into the tall trees above her temporary shelter. Should she introduce herself? No. Not yet. She dropped silently to the ground and entered the hideout, quietly closing the door behind her. What she found surprised her. Well. This is unexpected, Konan murmured to herself. Her daughter was leaning against the wall with Haku close beside her, and though it looked like a gentle, affectionate moment, what caught Konan off guard was the emotion. Haku was crying. Haku-chan, it's okay. You had every right to feel the way you did, Naruko said softly. No, it's not. I thought causing him trouble would make me feel better, but it didn't. I've never felt so overwhelmed, Haku replied. She pressed her forehead to Naruko's. It's natural to feel things strongly, said Tenten quietly. It shouldn't be. Ever since I met Naruko, I promised myself I wouldn't let anger control me again. But it looks like I still have a long way to go. Konan moved to sit near the group, to Naruko's left, close to the entrance. She offered a gentle voice. Feeling strong emotions is okay when it's for the right reasons. I don't know your whole story, but I can tell it's something important. You've likely been through a lot. I'm sorry for what you've faced. You don't have to apologize, Haku said, lifting her head to look at Konan. I've wanted to ask. Why did you bring us here? Haku asked softly. Their plan seemed to be working well. Haku's idea to get answers was proving smart. The conversation on the bridge had already hinted at her reasons. She wanted to stop those who posed a threat and protect her teammates. Naruko and Tenten had figured out part of it too. When they talked earlier, they realized fear had played a role. Haku had seen it in Kimimaro, and she had used it against him. But now that Konan was back, Haku had instructed them to keep the act going. Tears weren't hard to summon when they were rooted in truth. Bringing you here was instinct, Konan said. I wanted to keep the younger ones safe while the older ones handled the situation. Tenten, who had been quiet until now, looked up, curious. What's your name? And do you know anything about our teacher? My name is Konan. I'm afraid I don't know your sensei's status, but I did see Zabuza and someone with him being restrained and taken away. The one with the headband seemed especially aggressive during the search. Could that have been him? Tenten placed a hand on her chin thoughtfully and glanced at her teammates. It might be, she said. After a short pause, she looked back at Konan. Can we go now? The fight's over, and we need to find our sensei. You may go, Konan replied. As the three smiled in relief, Konan made a decision. I'm coming with you. Naruko raised an eyebrow. Why would she want to join them? She leaned her head against Haku's and held her closer, thoughtful. It wasn't that Naruko didn't want Konan to come, she just didn't know her yet. You're welcome to join us, Konan-san, she said kindly. Konan smiled warmly. Later, after ensuring her daughter and her friends were safely freed, Konan quietly followed their trail. The team soon spotted their sensei rushing along the path back to Konoha, with another messenger hawk perched gracefully on his arm. When Naruko called out from the trees, several Anbu agents suddenly appeared in front of them, their kunai drawn in a defensive stance, ready for action. As though he sensed them without seeing, Ibiki called out, "That's them, back to your stations." Obediently, the three teens stepped forward and nodded respectfully to Ibiki. Meanwhile, Konan's expression remained thoughtful. It wasn't difficult for her to understand the implications of having taken Naruko from the battlefield. She furrowed her brow slightly. If their sensei was as stern as he appeared, there could be some difficulty ahead. He exuded a commanding presence, and from how her daughter fought and spoke, she could tell Naruko had learned some of those same traits. Konan offered a faint smile. "Konan-san. Would you care to explain why you took my students during a mission?" Stepping from behind a tree, Konan brushed off the damp mist that clung to her cloak. With a simple motion, she dismissed the illusionary red clouds from her outfit. "I was simply acting as a protector," Konan replied, her voice light and calm. "And you think that's a valid reason to take my students from me during an operation?" Ibiki gestured to himself to emphasize his point. He wasn't pleased. His students had been taken in the middle of a skirmish, and he hadn't even realized it until later. Only after the whirlwind of paper struck the Kaguya boy did he think to investigate the fog. At that point, all he found was debris and confusion. His students were gone, and all that remained were torn surroundings and 4 ivory bones. Piecing the memory together, he recalled Kimimaro throwing the bones, one of them striking Naruko. Then Zabuza had charged into the chaotic scene where his apprentice attempted to overwhelm the team. That was when Ibiki had arrived and shifted the momentum. This woman must have seen the danger and taken the students to safety. "I intervened because they were clearly outmatched and needed support," Konan said, still smiling politely. That confirmed his suspicion. "You're aware that interfering in Konoha's affairs could have serious consequences, correct?" He gestured toward a tree where Zabuza and Kimimaro were restrained by chakra-infused chains. Decorative but firm collars sat around their necks, designed to suppress chakra, not harm. Konan's eyes briefly lingered on the young Kaguya, taking note of the small cuts the paper storm had left. The look on her face was not of satisfaction, but of careful observation. "At the very least, you would be brought in for questioning. Though I'll admit, you've done a good job tending to the injuries." Konan offered a respectful bow. Letting that moment settle, Ibiki finally turned his attention back to the path. The mist that often haunted these roads drifted ahead of them again. He paused briefly and then nodded toward Konan. "We should get moving." "Thank you," he said, voice calm. "I'm coming with you," Konan replied. Ibiki looked at her, caught slightly off guard. He was about to object, but Naruko gently tapped his shoulder. Leaning closer, she whispered into his ear, "I think we should let her come." Ibiki raised a skeptical brow. What were they planning? "Is there something you're not telling me?" Naruko gave a small shrug and brushed droplets off her hari. Tenten and Haku stood nearby. The cave they'd used earlier gave them a place to change out of damaged clothing, but Naruko had to borrow spare clothes from Haku and Tenten since she didn't have her scroll with her. She looked mildly amused by the whole ordeal. How much more unpredictable could this mission get? After a pause, Naruko stepped forward with her teammates. "She just said she wanted to come along." "I don't see a problem," Tenten added. "Why would she help us if she meant us harm?" "Fair point," Ibiki admitted, stroking his chin. "Could she be looking for information? Secrets?" "I doubt it," Tenten responded firmly. "All right," Ibiki finally agreed. Hours later, Konan sat quietly on a moss-covered log. Its slick surface made it a bit of a challenge to stay balanced. Above, the sky was dark, dotted with stars shimmering faintly through the canopy. The fire crackled gently, casting a warm glow that flickered across her face. "So, are you going to tell me the real reason you're following us?" Ibiki asked, his tone low but direct. "Or are you going to keep up the act even when the others are asleep?" Konan's posture shifted subtly. His question wasn't aggressive, but it was heavy with curiosity. She lowered her gaze to the fire. "I'll tell you," Ibiki's brows lifted in surprise, then narrowed thoughtfully as he settled across from her, "but I ask that you keep this between us until I decide otherwise. Understood?" He glanced back at the tent where his students were resting. He already had enough challenges building trust with them. Depending on what Konan revealed, this could change everything. He tapped the log beside him, giving her the floor. Konan inhaled quietly, steadying herself. Do you remember the 4th Hokage and the 9 Tails incident years ago? Of course, Ibiki replied. Everyone does. Konan nodded. Well. The 4th was my husband. Ibiki's eyes widened as he leaned back slightly, taken aback by the revelation. Could that be true? He ran through his memories. The 4th had been known to be married, but the identity of his spouse had been kept private, even Ibiki hadn't known. He studied Konan's expression carefully. There was more. And Naruko. She is my daughter. Ibiki nearly lost his balance on the log. He directed a hard look at Konan. That's a bold claim. Konan met his gaze calmly. If you don't believe me, we can go to the Hokage. Hiruzen has always said my chakra signature was unique. If that's not enough, a formal test can confirm everything, she said quietly. Ibiki settled, absorbing her words. She had thought this through. Do you have anything else to support your claim? I do, Konan said. She reached into her robe and pulled out a photograph. It showed the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, standing beside a woman visibly pregnant. His arm was gently draped over her shoulders, and he was smiling warmly down at her. The expression on his face was unmistakable, peace and happiness. Ibiki glanced between the image and Konan. The resemblance was clear. There was one final detail that sealed it. Is that really? Konan nodded. That's the Namikaze household, yes. So you really are Naruko's mother, Ibiki said quietly. Placing a thoughtful hand beside him, Ibiki offered Konan a measured look, his tone calm and serious. She may not be happy when she learns you were alive and didn't return to her. You're aware of that, aren't you? He asked gently. Konan turned her eyes away, the soft amber light casting a shadow over her expression. I didn't have many options, she said, brushing a hand lightly against her face. And even then, I had heard that she was lost during the 9 Tails rampage. Konan locked eyes with Ibiki, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. I searched the entire battlefield for hours. All I found was a single lock of hair and Minato's robe, resting together under the stars. It was a chaotic place. I didn't simply leave, it wasn't that easy. Tears escaped her eyes as her body trembled with emotion. A friend of mine named Nagato found me there and helped me get away. A few weeks later, we heard there was no trace of Naruko or Minato. It felt like everything had vanished. I never stopped searching, even if not as actively as in the beginning. I never gave up. It took great effort to keep her emotions from overwhelming her completely. For a moment, her expression wavered, revealing a flicker of strain before she composed herself once more. Ibiki noticed, but said nothing. But now I've found her, and I won't let anything take her away from me again. Ibiki listened in silence, absorbing her words. Occasionally, he rested his chin in his hands, watching her carefully. Despite her composed exterior, a quiet thought passed through his mind. She's been through a lot. If she stays, she should probably speak with a Yamanaka to help her process the past, he thought. He gave a small nod and bowed slightly. We'll see what happens. Konan smiled softly, the previous emotion gone from her face. There was nothing alarming about her expression now, if anything, she looked peaceful. Meanwhile, the Onbu operatives moved swiftly through the area, their task unfolding with precision. Bird, stationed atop a stone fence, observed the scene from above. Mist veiled the mansion below, but his team was making progress. The operatives were careful, disabling threats as they advanced. One of them, Dog, skillfully used a senbone to halt Gato, striking precisely to prevent escape without causing lasting harm. Gato, who had tried to flee, was stopped efficiently. Bird descended with a graceful leap, gently stopping another opponent with a precise movement. Earlier, Ibiki had walked through the town with 2 former enemies in custody. Zabuza had made a proposition: offer useful information about Gato in exchange for a lighter outcome. It seemed Zabuza was acting for his own reasons, as Kimimaro remained distant and quiet. With their mission complete, Bird returned to the bridge builder's home. He nodded respectfully to Tazuna as his teammate arrived with Gato, safely restrained. It's done. The bridge should be safe now that the source of the problem has been dealt with. What you do from here is your choice. Opening the door, Bird acknowledged Cat and Dog, who quickly returned to Ibiki's camp. Oh, one more thing, Bird added, rubbing his fingers together. Payment will be expected once your bridge is completed and your resources are in order. You have up to 6 months to gather the funds. With that, Bird returned to the camp and respectfully delivered his report to Ibiki. Mission accomplished. We return to Konoha tomorrow. Get some rest, Ibiki instructed calmly. Inside the team's tent, Tenten lay awake, her hand gently covering her mouth to muffle her breathing. She had overheard the earlier conversation and was still sorting through her thoughts. Turning to glance at Naruko, she paused in quiet reflection. She leaned over and gently tapped Naruko's nose, her expression contemplative. Should she say something now? She hesitated, then gave Naruko a quick kiss on the nose and laid back down, a small smile on her face. I'll tell her tomorrow, she thought. It's good to see Konoha again, Naruko exclaimed brightly. It really is, Haku agreed with a smile. It had taken 2 full days, but the group of shinobi was finally within sight of their village. Zabuza and Kimimaro remained restrained with chains and wire during the entire journey, though Kimimaro's lingering gaze toward Haku irritated not only Haku herself but also Naruko and Tenten. Though nothing serious happened, Ibiki kept a watchful eye and ensured discipline was maintained with calm authority anytime Zabuza or Kimimaro acted out of line. Konan, escorted by Anbu, maintained a calm and composed demeanor, staying quiet and observant. Though she was guarded, she understood the caution. She was, after all, someone unfamiliar to them, someone who had once held something important from their side, someone they hadn't entirely come to trust yet. Still, the way the Anbu moved was far from silent. Their steps were loud, crunching the earth beneath them with every motion. Their supposed stealth only tested Konan's patience. The dissonance of noise made her silently wish for peace and quiet. She turned her gaze briefly toward Naruko, walking ahead, and reminded herself to remain patient. Just a little longer. As they neared the village gates, Naruko, Haku, and Tenten exchanged a knowing look and quickly vanished from sight the moment the tree line opened up. They leapt skillfully into the treetops and soared over the wall, moving too swiftly for even the trained eyes of the Chonin guards. There was no time to waste. Unbeknownst to them, Konan followed as well, effortlessly escaping her inattentive guards. By the time Ibiki noticed, the Anbu were scattered and the trio had disappeared. All he had with him now were the 2 quiet prisoners behind him. Naruko, Haku, and Tenten wandered through the village streets, nostalgia washing over them as they passed the academy. The warm midday sun illuminated the buildings, casting long shadows as they talked about their recent mission and their earlier days. It had only been a week since their departure, but it felt much longer. They had grown, matured. What they had encountered during the mission lingered in their minds. Not the intensity of battle, but the weight of responsibility. It wasn't about conflict, it was about what it meant to protect, to survive, and to endure. They now carried the knowledge that real experiences changed people, sometimes quietly, but always deeply. They each remembered how hunger had once felt, empty bellies and tired eyes, and how important even the simplest things were. But their recent challenges hadn't been easy. They now understood what it meant to face tough choices. The quiet now felt heavier, as if the silence carried all the emotions they couldn't express out loud. So they kept walking, not wanting to speak. They moved quickly, their footsteps the only sound echoing between the buildings. It was oddly soothing and distracting at the same time. Eventually, Tenten and Haku led Naruko to a large tree near the academy entrance, their favorite spot. Naruko hadn't even realized they were so close to it until they stopped. Why don't we do that more often? Naruko asked, attempting to lift the mood. I don't know, Naruko-chan, why don't you tell me? Tenten replied playfully, sticking her tongue out with a small laugh. I asked because I don't know, Naruko replied with a soft grin, mirroring the expression. Tenten glanced over at Haku with a raised eyebrow. It's because you two are always so loud, Haku said gently, concealing a teasing smile behind her robe. Naruko and Tenten looked at her in exaggerated surprise. Haku? Joking? It was rare enough to make them nearly stumble in shock. Naruko narrowed her eyes with a playful glint. Or maybe it's you who's too loud, your senbone always clink when you walk. Then, with a sudden playful gesture, she gave both girls a quick kiss on the cheek before slipping back into a composed stance. Tenten and Haku blushed faintly, and Haku gave Naruko a light, friendly tap in return. The 3 stood together, posing quietly beneath the tree, not trying to draw attention, but simply feeling calm. They understood each other. They just needed time. Time to reflect. Time to breathe. Time to let their hearts settle. The 3 nestled close together, their bodies gently resting against the tree's trunk as they watched people pass by, time moving forward gently as long as no one lingered too long, caught up in thoughts they couldn't change. For what felt like hours, they stayed there in quiet companionship, letting their minds drift while they found peace in the stillness and each other's presence. Behind their masks, if someone had looked closely, they might have seen three young hearts trying to find comfort. The past days had been filled with unfamiliar faces and uncertain moments. They had been surrounded by unfamiliar settings and emotions, and everything felt overwhelming. That's why they skipped the usual check-in. Instead, they returned to something familiar, this tree. It wasn't just a tree to them, but a symbol of connection, of shared experience. Anyone who wore the same mask knew this feeling. It was their quiet place, where even silence could feel safe. At some point, they all had grown attached to the tree and to one another. When the sun reached its highest point in the afternoon sky, the three quietly made their way back to their shared apartment, hoping they could stay there for the rest of the day and find a little more calm. "What do you want?" Conan asked. She was now seated against the bark of the tree where the three had previously been. One leg hung lazily off the edge as she leaned back, relaxed in appearance but alert in spirit. She had watched them for a long while, smiling when they interacted gently, frowning when they sat in stillness. Conan understood what they were going through. She recognized the need for care, for someone to be present. She had longed for the chance to support Naruko, to be there when she stumbled, to offer comfort when sadness crept in. She had lost that chance once before. But now that she had found Naruko again, she promised herself she wouldn't let go this time. Ibiki spoke calmly, trying to steady his breath. "You've had us chasing after you for over 2 hours. You're surrounded now. Please come to the Hokage's office so we can resolve this. You're not in trouble, but it would be best for everyone if you came peacefully." Conan seemed to disregard his words at first, her gaze distant. After a sharp look from Ibiki, she finally answered. "Only if you can convince Naruko to come," she said quietly, her eyes resting on the distant rooftops of the village's less fortunate district. "No," came his firm response. Their eyes met, and something in Conan's expression changed, intense and unwavering. "Why not?" Her voice remained calm, though her presence was unshakable. Ibiki hesitated before answering. "You're a foreign kunoichi and still considered unpredictable. Your claim of being Naruko's mother hasn't been confirmed, and in today's world, even photographs can be manipulated." Conan didn't flinch. "Is that how it is?" Ibiki felt uneasy at her steady gaze. "You're asking me, someone who cares deeply for her child, to leave her behind again?" Conan said softly, placing a thoughtful finger to her lips. "And if I truly were a threat, would those children have been unharmed?" "You took them without permission," he said, his frustration rising. Conan responded calmly, "And in doing so, I protected them." Ibiki clenched his jaw. She had tested every bit of his patience, her claim to Naruko, her sudden reappearance, and now her implication that the children were safer away from him. He struggled to keep his composure. "Just breathe, Ibiki." "Fine. Whatever you say." "Oh? Then we should go find Naruko-chan," Conan said with quiet resolve. "She'll be called in by the Anbu," Ibiki replied. Conan gave him a serious look. "And if she doesn't show, I'll go to her myself, and I won't require your permission or the Hokage's." Ibiki hesitated, then extended a hand, which Conan shook. Without another word, she disappeared in the direction of the Hokage's office, with Ibiki following shortly behind. Meanwhile, back at Naruko's apartment, the three lay peacefully together on the bed. Exhaustion had caught up to them, emotionally and physically. In moments like this, they returned to what brought them peace, simply being together. All three wore their cozy pajamas, huddled close. Naruko gently held them around the waist, while their heads rested softly on her shoulders. The room was quiet, warm, and safe. Then Tenten spoke. "Naruko-chan?" Naruko stirred slightly, her eyes half closed. "Yes, Tenten-chan? I have something I need to tell you." Naruko opened her eyes fully, brushing a strand of hair from her shoulder. It drifted briefly in the air and landed on Tenten's nose, making her cross-eyed for a split second. Tenten blinked, mildly embarrassed. She looked at Naruko flatly. "You did that on purpose?" Naruko grinned slightly. "I can't control the breeze." "Sure you can," Tenten joked, nudging her gently. Naruko gave a soft laugh. "So, what did you want to say, Ten-chan?" Tenten sat up, breathing in deeply, as if preparing for something important. "It's about that woman." Naruko raised an eyebrow. "Conan-san?" Tenten nodded. "Yes." Naruko leaned back slightly, relaxing as she placed an arm around Tenten's shoulder with care. "Is it about how she helped us on the bridge? I still can't believe she carried all three of us at once." Ten chuckled quietly, wondering the same thing herself, before shaking her head. No, not that. But something important. Naruko watched her closely. All right, I'm listening. I overheard Konan-san and Ibiki-san talking. Naruko could feel an echo of disquiet uncertainty lather itself over her friend, so she did the only thing she could. She softly fingered her shoulder before smoothly shifting her almost in her lap when she nodded at her concerned gaze. It was true that they hadn't really trusted Ibiki as much as everyone probably thought they had. It was difficult to explain. They were talking about why she took us away from the battlefield and hid us. I know that, I figured Sensei would ask her. No, but you don't understand. Gently, Ten turned to face her directly, careful not to wake Haku. They started to talk about why she was there, and it got me thinking, why was she? Ten shrugged. So I stayed up and kept listening and... What did they say? Naruko interrupted. Quiet. I'm getting to that. Sorry, please continue. Naruko rose a hand and almost bowed in place, surprisingly. Though what surprised her more was the fact that Haku hadn't woken from their talking. But then that also wasn't much of a surprise in and of itself. She nodded and did so. Before they got into anything interesting, I'll tell you now that one of the Anbu came back from some secret mission Ibiki-sensei gave them. That's why we left, why we didn't stay for the rest of the mission. There wasn't one anymore. Naruko arched a brow. Did Ibiki finish the mission without them? Then I heard Konan-san and Ibiki-sensei talk. It was casual, almost like they were talking about the past. I couldn't make out everything, but there was one detail that I definitely could. Naruko nodded in response. I heard that. A knock on the door cut her off immediately. A shying stillness hung remarkably in the air, as palpable as a thin veil of silk. So precious. So quiet. Each breath added to their surprise and utter astonishment, sending ripples down the misted veil like an ocean's wave. Even Haku awoke with her hair blindly running off their paths and carelessly falling off the sides of her head. Ten sighed gently at the look Haku was making half-heartedly before she ran a hand lightly over her hair to hopefully fix some of the eloping strands. Who could that be? Naruko wondered cynically. Picking herself up, Naruko muttered to Ten, tell me when I get back. She nodded, though her mind staggered to think of another time she could tell her. But as she watched Naruko tower over her and walk out of the room, she conceded reluctantly and pulled Haku up to lay beside her, if only to mess with her hair more. Ten sat anxiously, waiting conscientiously for whoever was knocking on their door. Then her eyes befell Haku, who by now was merely staring up at her with innocent eyes. If she was going to tell someone, then it was going to be Haku after Naruko, but she was going to tell someone before the day was done, she thought. Opening the door just after another fist struck the door, Naruko almost scowled at the sight of Kakashi and his Jinan. Why were they here? She scratched her head and stared at them blankly, just waiting for them to leave. But alas, her hopes were dashed as Kakashi merely stared at her. Though withholding any unnecessary comments, Naruko crossed her arms and asked the question she knew they would answer with a vexed stare. What do you need, Kakashi-sensei? Hokage-sama has summoned you. He mentioned something revolving around that woman your team brought back with you. However, what surprised her even more was that it wasn't Kakashi who stated the reason for their presence. It was Itsuki. He stood tall, taller really, his stature seeming to have grown larger and more bulk since the short time they had met before. On his back, the naginata hid faithfully under cloth and leather to keep it hidden. His analysis was short and time-consuming as the boy perspired under her stare as if he were in a sauna. Still, his stature remained taut and tight while he awkwardly squirmed under her gaze. He tipped his head to the side and just chose to ignore what he said as much as Itsuki wanted to just leave. He was much more enticed by the other news. You've changed, haven't you? Naruko stated quietly, her demeanor returning to that of her former self, her quiet, soft self. Yes. I suppose. Yet, his silence was the one mainstay that came alive no matter what it seemed. Leaning over and planking herself to the wall like the true interrogator she was, Naruko couldn't help but smirk delightfully at them before she coolly stared, although her time to shine collapsed cruelly onto her at the voice of Haku, who saw fit to lean dutifully on her shoulder like a parrot. Why didn't you wake me up, Naruko-chan? You know I hate being the last one out of bed, she fussed. Naruko merely met her barely open eyes with a forgiving gaze, even if she would do it again. She answered with the caring only a parent would show, sorry, Haku-chan, I didn't want to wake you up. She glanced over to the four waiting people. Kakashi-sensei and his squad came by and I decided to answer for you, go men. Haku hardly left a moment of thought before she sighed and nuzzled close to her. She really wasn't a morning person in the afternoon. But then Haku chimed in. Surprisingly, her narrowed eyes wanting to burn them to a crisp, yet her voice sounded just outside annoyance. It isn't very kind for you people to arrive unannounced. Especially just after a mission. You live with Naruko? Sasuke stated, befuddled. Kakashi and Sakura, in turn, raised unanswered questions while they crossed their arms. An unmistakable frown wrinkled their brows. Yes, Haku answered, wide awake. Her placid facade overbore anything she must have felt before. Why? Sasuke questioned. Naruko could see a discernible strain and drought in blood at the tips of his knuckles as he implied the hiding desire behind soft white skin. We're family. Isn't that obvious? As if to prove her statement, Haku tipped her head and grinned. Warm arms wrapped around Naruko's neck and pulled her closer to her. Shaking her head, Kakashi coughed and disrupted Sasuke before she spoke again, lest he make more of a fool of himself. Anyways, Kakashi curtly explained, we have come to explain that the Hokage needs you now. That's it? Tenten asked. Almost as if they were bugs, their eyes widened even further before Sasuke exclusively constricted and he felt the gentle action reaction he was so familiar with. Sasuke took one step forward. That meant he needed one step back. He did, while smoothly teetering Haku onto Tenten's shoulder. Naruko shielded her right side with one of her arms. She left her other hand free and her stance rigid. Sasuke hit her arm-shielding arm. Good. To either side of Sasuke, Naruko could tell Itsuki and his teammates were both shocked by what she was doing, Kakashi not even there, her presence, gone. But that was answered quickly, even if it did take her longer than it should have. She reappeared next to Sasuke and grappled his shoulder. Slowly, Kakashi muttered something shallowly in his ear. A warning by the look in her eye. What just happened? Tenten asked, confused. Naruko turned to address her but was shocked by the sheer amount, or lack thereof, of clothing. Or so it seemed. Another look, a few steps closer, and Naruko could see she was actually fully dressed in her usual outfit, though none of that could be seen over the giant blanket she carried coyly around her bare shoulders. Why did her life have to be so confusing? So you're starting a family then, eh? Peering over to the boy, Naruko jested that she had calmed down with the little amount of words Kakashi offered. Itsuki and Sakura both rolled their eyes with this one. They were both done. And Sakura expressed her annoyance, just be quiet so we can go. You can have this talk later. It was not a question. Sasuke continued to level a hard stare towards her with her merely raising a brow. Even though she really didn't like Sasuke, Naruko couldn't say that she didn't understand him at the very least. Come on, let's go. And as wisely as he seemed, Sasuke jerked his head away and walked down the cemented halls, and down the stairs, away from their gaze. Well, I think we've overstayed our welcome, Itsuki nodded to Naruko. Then, they were gone. Naruko sighed and turned, she needed to speak to the. Naruko blinked, looked at either side of her small apartment, blinked, then she sighed again. Figures. While she had her back turned, the two of them had made a disaster of their apartment. Even though she knew they were obligated to show up quickly for the Hokage's meeting. She ducked and watched as a sock flew over her head. This was getting a little ridiculous. After a moment, and a paramount of flying clothes, Naruko rapidly noticed her own lack of clothing, aka she was practically nude with Haku hanging on her shoulder when she was talking to them, and what's worse was, she only had on her cloud underwear. Shit. Naruko, after a moment of repent, stared over to the girls and merely offered a stern canvas as she blatantly represented her annoyance. Really? She asked. The two leaned into view, fully dressed in their usual garb and smiled, slipping their masks on. Yup, they said in unison. Dear YouTube viewers. And that's all for today's segment. I really hope you enjoyed it. Your support means the world to me, and I'm always looking for ways to improve my content for all of you. So, if you have any feedback, suggestions, or thoughts on the video, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below. Your opinions help me shape and refine these fanfic videos to better match what you all love. After all, you guys are my priority, and I want to make sure I'm bringing you content that excites and entertains you. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this community. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it if you consider doing so. It helps a lot and keeps you up to date on all future content I'll be posting. Thanks again for your time and support. You're all amazing, and I can't wait to bring you even more stories soon. Until next time, take care and see you in the next one. With gratitude. 6 Path Weeb.